the art form that is pro wrestling and the emotional connection that keeps us coming back. As always, I'm Chris.
I'm Fax.
We are the Curtain Jerks, and tonight we are talking Wrestle Kingdom. Fax, how good did it feel to watch a wrestling show with that many people in attendance? That was that good.
You know, we talked about during our preview of, is this going to feel like Wrestle Kingdom? And it felt like Wrestle Kingdom, you know? And it's, you know, as you know, Chris, I go back in the archives. There's Wrestle Kingdoms I had never seen. And I've been rewatching a lot of some of the older ones during a more down period in New Japan relative to today. And, you know, some of these shows, they were only selling like 20,000 tickets with no restrictions. This is obviously less people than that, but people wanted to be there. I felt great. It felt like Wrestle Kingdom. It met all of my expectations around how I'd feel about this type of show. And it really makes me jazzed about the future of pro wrestling in 2021.
Yeah, it felt really good. It felt good even though I was up in the middle of the night with a 2.5-year-old who had also decided that she did not want to sleep for the first night. Which was an interesting experience, which I'll talk more about in a bit. But it still felt, I mean, it was great. My daughter's deep opinions on this is that Hiromu's jacket is pretty, and that El Phantasmo is funny. And Okada. That was
Rainmaker.
The Rainmaker. I can't. You know, it's one things I'm sure that those of us with kids know is it's impossible for me to tell whether she actually likes Okada or whether I'm just simply brainwashing her, and she's just like, "Daddy seems to like this guy a lot." But if he keeps saying his name, I'll learn how to say that name. He's on Daddy's shirt at the time.
And one of the easier Japanese names for a child to say, an American child to say. Yeah. I think that helped. But, you know, I think one of the underrated things, too, is I feel like this was the perfect length for a 2-night show, right? If you watched all of this was all together in one night, it would be crazy long. And then the fear is you go to 2 nights and it's too long because you go a little bit and I think last year Wrestle Kingdom was a little too long with the 2 nights. They didn't really need, and this kind of felt like it. Obviously, I know it's because of the pandemic and things like that, but it kind of feels like if you're going to do a 2-night event, this looks like this should be the template to me. You know, about 6 matches each night, about 3 hours of actual like in-ring time. It feels great for the biggest show of the year.
It worked. I mean, I thought, like everything got the amount of time that it needed to. They didn't have anything, but it didn't feel like anything was cut and needed, really, which was nice. And as you said, it felt like the shows were at the end of the shows. You didn't feel totally drained.
Right.
I felt drained watching night 2, but that's because I was totally out of it after the night 1 debacle. But even then, I was able to get up and really enjoyed that, and was able to take in the pieces of the shows that I missed, but because of falling asleep. And it was it was just great to have that day to watch that show, and it was easy and a perfect amount of time to watch.
Yeah, totally agreed. I actually ended up watching it over 3 days, so I didn't really watch night 1 then night 2. I watched most of night 1, then I kind of watched the end of night 1 and the beginning of night 2, and then I watched everything kind of I watched I think then the last 2 matches of night 2 on the third night for me, as some of our listeners know. Night 1 is my wife's birthday, so it's a little hard to watch the whole show that night, and then that kind of puts you behind the 8 ball for the rest of it. But I do feel like you could have watched this whole show in one sitting, both nights, and well, maybe not one sitting, but
in one sitting, it's basically a WrestleMania.
Yeah, I meant one sitting in the way that you're not literally never getting up to pee or anything during WrestleMania. But again, presumably you're not watching live. You can pause it. It's all good.
Yeah, I will also. So I knew you. As I said, I knew you were a little bit behind in watching it because of important obligations. I texted you. I feel like I have a hot take that I don't think I have seen anyone else say. Although a lot of people have, I don't think are so far from me on this. My take is that Wrestle Kingdom Night 2 had the best New Japan match since Kenny Omega left, and that was Ibushi and Jay White. I thought it was a masterpiece. I thought it was spectacular. I loved the storytelling of it and the pacing of it. It really felt like Jay White was meant to wrestle a match this long. That it I don't know.
Yeah.
It felt like his work made sense adding those extra 10, 15 minutes. I think it's a classic. And again, as I said, I don't think anything has topped it in the last 2 years. You disagree with me.
I disagree with you, but I'll say this. After you told me that, I started looking through, because I started kind of mentally compiling my favorite matches in the last 2 years. And I think I would stick by that. But I did notice that in mine, they're all junior matches, right?
Oh, interesting.
It's the Shingo Osprey match, the Shingo Hiromu, the Osprey Hiromu match from last year's Wrestle Kingdom. When I started thinking about actually the heavyweight matches, I personally think I will still have a soft spot for the MSG match with Okada and Jay White.
Sure.
I think that's but I definitely started looking at it, and in terms of like heavyweight matches and matches with a lot of stakes and matches certainly at a big show, I'd be hard pressed to say any better. And I think also, by the way, my hot take, which I think has been expressed by many other people online, is clearly I don't think this is how 2020 wasn't booked the way it was supposed to be booked, or Guido is definitely losing it, right? Because this just showed you the difference with how brutal those matches with Evil have been. And then we see Jay White, and Jay White's a good wrestler, right? We know he's a good wrestler at this point. I wouldn't have said that a few years ago, but he's definitely a really good wrestler right now. But just the night and day difference between the world title matches, certainly of the entire calendar year 2020, it just was a sea of difference. And
yeah, the repetition with Evil at the end, I still can forgive the attempt of taking a shot with him. Obviously, then Naito needed to get the belt back. Okay. I'm still trying to get over what the point of one more match at Power Struggle was. Still.
I don't get the point of one more match at Power Struggle. And honestly, I still don't get the point of the whole Evil experiment, right? What was the point of that? So if the point is now knowing we know, so Sonata beats Evil here. And so it looks like Sonata's going to be our next challenger.
Mm-hmm.
Dakota Ibushi's dual championships. Still no announcement of splitting those things back out, or just officially merging them so he doesn't have to carry two belts around. But like, did that really succeed in that? Did that really get Sonata over? Was that win over Evil at Wrestle Kingdom more impressive because Evil was the champion earlier in the year?
I think a little bit. But I do think the last 2 months are basically Gato admitting defeat on Evil. Because I think they're setting him up for another Okada match that he's going to lose. I think it's a little bit like we took our shot. He's a mid-carder. He's an upper mid-card guy. We built him up by winning the title, and now he's going to lose to some people to give them a little bit of something. Even
more so now, there is nothing anyone will ever do to convince me that Evil with a championship run was ever the plan. And I think it was Jay White in that role. Because, again, everything else that happens afterwards makes perfect sense if Jay White's the one that has that title run and not Evil. And the Evil stuff, again, Sonata, big win over his former tag team partner. That's still a big match. The people like Sonata. And then let me just also editorialize on this. I hate Sonata coming out after the last match to kind of do the, congratulations, and I'm going to issue a challenge. I hated it when Kenta did it last year. I hated it this year with Sonata. To me, it feels like it just cheapens this biggest stage. It feels amateur night. That's what New Year's Dash is for. Like if AEW or WWE did that, where WWE right after the WrestleMania main event, Dolph Ziggler came out and challenged it, which is again what Kenta was last year, and I know the Japanese fans don't think of Sonata as Dolph Ziggler, but I kind of do. That's kind of what it is. It's like, let's have this epic hoss fight of, Roman against somebody big in the main event of WrestleMania, and then Dolph Ziggler comes out afterwards because, hey, somebody has to fight Roman in the April pay-per-view or the May pay-per-view.
It is interesting because I think Ibushi clearly demonstrated why he's, the champion for next year over the course of those two nights. Both the quality of his work, how over he was, the response that he got from the crowd, but also just the depth and range that he showed in those matches in terms of what his emotional character development could be as champion, I think is fascinating. I'm so interested to see where that goes. And of course, to be confronted by stone-faced Sonata, disappointing a little bit. But
yeah, well, and I'm going to even push on even stronger than what you said. And I, by the way, have a specific note, and I'm interested if you agree. Basically, the first 30-ish minutes of that match, I literally was wrote before I knew the finish or before I knew anything. I'm literally writing. Let me see the match. If you look at like the and we'll talk about it more. Tanahashi Okan match was kind of like that template Monster of the Month Hogan match kind of thing. That's the formula they went, which is kind of what we expected. This was really Ibushi playing the Bret Hart title defense, or even maybe the Sting title defense. Right, that's the way for the first 30 minutes, not obviously the last 10 or 15. But again, he can just pivot to all these things that I'll go further than what you said, that we're excited about Ibushi for the next year. To me, it goes, again, I got to keep bashing Guido here. Why the fuck did it take this long? Why aren't we already a year into this, right? Ibushi, wait, I have a factoid here.
Okay.
Do you know that almost to the day, the age difference between Tanahashi and Okada, I'm sorry, the age difference between Tanahashi and Ibushi is almost to the day the same disparity between Ibushi and Okada on the other side. Ibushi is as much older than Okada as Tanahashi is older than Ibushi.
Yeah, I mean, look, they waited too long with Ibushi. I think there's good reason for that, and I do think in this way, I think the last year played out well. In that they had waited too long on Naito, but they did not get to that. Obviously, there was, but they also had some of the Naito stuff out a little bit. I think all of it happened with Ibushi in terms of him teaming with Tanahashi. And the losing to Jay White, the losing the briefcase stuff, I think that all played out quite in terms of. I apologize, I'm having a little bit of an audio issue. So go back to what I was saying. I think a lot of the last year played out very well in terms of setting this up. I think they waited too long on Naito, I agree. But in terms of Ibushi, I think his development over the last year, winning the G1 a second time, but losing the briefcase to White, the tag team with Tanahashi, where Tanahashi sort of not God.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't understand the losing the briefcase. I get a lot of what you're saying, and I think he's had an incredible year. I like the Tanahashi thing. I like what that sets up down the road. But I feel like him losing the briefcase after winning Wrestle Kingdom a second time felt very WWE to me. That felt very, we have to fit 2 nights of main events in. Therefore, we're going to do this. And okay, who's going to be our big winner? Okay, then definitionally, let's go with hackneyed writing 101, and that guy has to be the biggest underdog. So let's have the guy, and I think also retrospectively, it also makes Naito look dumb, right? He because we don't know if he would have beat Jay White, you know, and now he put up, and I get it's the fighting honor thing. I'm not gonna get too hard on the Naito part, but I really don't understand Ibushi losing the briefcase, and I know it wasn't a clean loss. But still, it felt so WWE to me, and that's, as people that know me, that is not a compliment.
But I think that played again. I'll even defend that in the sense that setting up White in that position, that's as his last FU, where he was impossible to in the pole position, was perfect. I think in terms of Ibushi overcoming him, and. You look back, it's the multiple victories he had over Ibushi, 3 in a row. And the fact that Ibushi had that match the night before, and they're going 45 minutes, I think played very well. I think that all played out very well. I agree, it's kind of hackneyed the way it was done. But I think it played out in a satisfying way. And I guess that's the big thing for me. about Wrestle Kingdom, right? I felt very satisfied at the end of 2 nights of wrestling.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, and two, just I will say that it does. I think that your strongest point there that I agree with the most is the building of Jay White into a really credible threat. I'll also say, by the way, and obviously this is an empty arena, but between the actual empty arena, the lightly packed arenas, even this is obviously the most people that we've seen at a wrestling show, but less than a normal Wrestle Kingdom. In these scenarios, Guido and Jay White play so well together. The fact that they're teasing at the beginning with Jay White being like, no, I'm going to actually show fighting spirit. We're not going to cheat, just so they could kind of do these verbal things in the beginning when the crowd's quiet with the cheating. I mean, that was just great, great stuff. And, you know, it's interesting. And it's interesting that, we see, like, was this possibly Jay White's last hurrah, which I don't know about you. I had no inkling that this really could be going into the show. I thought there was a very tangible chance Jay White was going to walk out with those titles, but that obviously didn't happen.
Maybe his last. I tend to think this is more on the play. My contract is in order to put.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I tend to think, and we were talking about this earlier, I tend to think that Jay White's probably worth more to New Japan than anywhere else to me. Obviously, you never want to count out WWE, and obviously if WWE gives him a Godfather deal, he'd be a fool to not take it. He's 28 years old. He's got a long career in this business. Why not make some really big money and try to make that big A plus name for yourself in the West? That's not going to hurt his stock in Japan either, by the way. People look at Kenta. You can going to a WWE run, even that's not super successful, is not going to kill the business you can do when you come back to Japan. So, I hope not, because again, I've really become enjoying Jay White and this current character and the partnership with Guido. And, there is this interesting that I think they're going to be doing a Bullet Club Civil War. I think there keeps being more hints about this. And I think that's going to happen anyway. And that's obviously a lot more interesting if Jay White's a part of it. Jay White's not a part of it. I don't know how interesting that is.
Yeah, and part of it, I think the really sad thing would be, I think we've always said, Jay White from being a guy found a deal, but who was really struggling in terms of creating. And I think this is where and hit that top level.
Yeah. And I'm realizing now just I'm looking at a couple of my heavyweight notes here. Obviously, Kota Ibushi, the Golden Star, said that if he wins these titles, he's becoming a god. Is he now the Golden God?
Ooh.
That's an interesting one. And then one thing that we kind of breezed right over the night one match. The night one match, not as good. A good match, a really good match. If that was the only main event of Wrestle Kingdom, it would have felt like a little bit of a letdown, I feel like, but still a very good match. These two guys are incapable of not having a really good match. But not the best match they've even had against each other. But one of the nice touches that is one of those things that I'm interested in your opinion on. They did the thing. Ibushi, gets the 1-2-3 on Naito. His music starts playing. The belts are in the ring, and then he does that bit where he goes back to cover him again, like he's been knocked so loopy he doesn't even realize he's already won. I thought that was a wonderful thing. That was like a great little character moment and an interesting little thing that's so New Japan, so like strong style, like fighting spirit. But it's like, really, CTE has now been how many years have we been talking about this? And you're going to do especially with these two guys that have had so many big matches, that they've taken so many big head hits. And which is weird because, again, there was nowhere near the level of concussion causing type spots in this one compared to when these two were going at it a couple years ago.
Well, I think that was one of the smart things about the match, right? Is that they understood that everyone was terrified for them and played around that and did some big bumps, right? But not nearly as many, and really were able to get the most out of those big bumps by teasing them a little bit, and letting them play out and playing out that match a little bit more slowly.
Yeah. And just one last comment on Ibushi. This is a bit of a non sequitur. He's the champ now. He's the big boss man. He's the champ. He's walking out with both double titles. He won both main event nights. He is the star. He is the ace, whatever you want to call it. He really needs a haircut. And again, I'm not saying he needs to go crazy hair like Ibushi or Naito or something like that. But he's the man's 38 years old and is the number one wrestler in his continent, right? He looks like he's 12 with that haircut, and Kenny's never going to want him back with that hair. I mean,
he's really got to update. Even Bieber's updated the hair. He basically has Bieber. Yeah, I agree. He's got to find Tanahashi, especially. I mean, who else should be helping him work on his hair other than Hiroshi Tanahashi, the man of 1,000 hairstyles,
or Suzuki? Right, that's the thing is he could have a hair versus hair match with Suzuki, but it's a reverse hair versus hair, where it's the winner gets their hair done by the loser. So that he can beat Suzuki in order to acquire his artistry on his scalp.
That sounds amazing. Maddie agrees.
Yes.
I will say the other. But yeah, I'm again very excited for Ibushi. The guy I'm most excited to see challenge Ibushi at some point. Also had Kingdom. Will Ospreay. I think his match with Okada was really just a hair below Ibushi and White.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say I liked it better. But I would say that if I was one to actually give out snowflakes, I think I probably would have technically given them the same rating, and then depending on how I was feeling that day would be which one I prefer. I would say too though that Ospreay for sure, but I think Okada too is really interesting because now the dynamic is flipped. Ibushi's the top guy, and this is the most interesting Okada's ever been. Because I don't know, him chasing evil, I'm not interested by that. Him and Naito, we'd already seen that. Now, and obviously we've seen him in Ibushi, but the dynamic has shifted, and in just such a clear way that Naito was already a tippy-top guy before he won the double main event. Ibushi really wasn't. He obviously is one of the top guys in the company, but he's never actually had that coronation. This is and this really was what Vince McMahon tries to do at WrestleMania with Ibushi. And Okada, by the way, I was very surprised he gets the win. I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, this was, by the way, all baby faces all over the top of this card. This really was...
We're in the middle of a pandemic. You got to send them home happy.
I guess so. Yeah, the viewing public at home. But yeah, that was just... The last 5 minutes of that Okada-Ospreay match was just magnifique.
Well, that's a good point. I was not expecting... I had picked Ospreay to win. But at the same time, Ospreay's got to work his way up a little bit. It's maybe an indication that he's still considered, just a hair below, and he's got to work his way up. But I'm with you, though. I think Okada, as Ibushi train develops, I want to see him and Okada wrestle dynasty.
Ooh, hopefully that's a thing that happens in America.
Thing.
Yeah, no, I agree that I was kind of I had penciled in. I'm not gonna lie, I had penciled in Ospreay to win, and I thought that Ospreay would be the first challenger on whoever comes out with the title. Which again, I think you and I were thinking Ibushi probably was the Vegas favorite in that one. And then I thought potentially it could be something else, but that's kind of what we thought. And for that kind of reason, that it seemed like Okada, especially if it's Ibushi, they're going to wait to build it up. And clearly, again, with Sonata being apparently the number one contender for reasons unknown to me, it's a better, a new beginning main event, right? That type of match where Okada, I think you want to hold that in the chamber. Again, for probably the two shows you mentioned. Or, I mean, again, if they're going really with the long story here, could be Wrestle Kingdom next year, right? I think a full year Ibushi title reign is not implausible by any means.
Yeah, and I think Okada G1 final sounds pretty great. If Okada hasn't gotten that big match yet against Ibushi, him going for it by winning the G1 would be, I think, a really interesting angle.
Well, and here would be even my pitch for why I would even maybe, if I had to put money on it right now, I might pick that. Is that B? I don't know who the other obvious one would be. You kind of can keep Okada away from him until the G1. I think that story writes itself, right? Keep Okada strong, keep Okada interesting. I don't know that Osprey is going to be ready by next year, right? I don't think they're going to want a rematch of Naito. Jay White might not be around, and I don't know if they want to do a rewrite. And then the other big one is Tanahashi, and you got to figure a big Tanahashi Ibushi match is happening at some point in 2021. It's going to be main eventing one of their big shows. That's going to happen. I can't imagine that that's where they'd want to go with the next Wrestle Kingdom, right? I think Tanahashi, love him to death. I think his days main eventing Wrestle Kingdoms were over. I think they were over before that last one with Omega, and then it kind of had to happen. But so that's where I would say I think maybe even Tanahashi is the guy they're going saying maybe he's the big Dominion guy or Wrestle Dynasty, because obviously by the time we get to Dominion, we'll know, presumably they'll know whether that's a thing that's going to happen or not.
Well, and just to say, I think given that I think the G1 will be at around the same time next year, if it's not Wrestle Dynasty, I'm imagining there's a big Jingo Stadium show. So
right.
Right. I mean,
right. And again, maybe Osprey gets one of those matches too, right? It's totally plausible. I think there's other guys. I mean, going down the card, I know we had said in the pre-show we were going to go into the junior title matches, but you know what? If we could talk about one other match first, because another interesting one was I think the other one that I think can be mentioned with the two matches we mentioned as the potential. I couldn't really argue that hard if somebody told me the match of Wrestle Kingdom was Jeff Cobb and Shingo Takagi.
Yeah.
That was probably my favorite match. Like, again, I don't think it was the best match. I don't think that technically it's on the level of those other two that we mentioned. But it was just an absolute. It exceeded my expectations. They just beat the living shit out of each other. It was everything I hoped Jeff Cobb could be, and I think that honestly, and this is probably me drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. You Chris, you know how much I love these Never Division guys and these strong style guys. I keep saying, how has Ishii never been in a Wrestle Kingdom main event? You know, how is even Goto, who's not quite to the Ishii level, how is he not a bigger deal? How is Suzuki not main eventing Wrestle Kingdom every year? So maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid too much, but I really feel like if and when Shingo ever drops that Never title, and it isn't if, he may never drop it. I think he's another guy that could potentially get. He's not getting Wrestle Dynasty, I don't think. I don't think he's getting Wrestle Kingdom, but he's a guy that absolutely could get a world title shot on Ibushi at a big show, and that's another one that would be an absolute banger.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, I was thinking Cobb were going to have a really good match. I thought the athleticism and creativity, how they shit at each other, was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I just Jeff Cobb was just clicked perfectly with the Japanese strong style too, which I feel like we always knew that he had it in him, and he just did it. And with the super and just the creativity and the innovation that they showed in that match, while staying very true to their characters and their move sets, that was just because you and I talked about it. It seemed like on paper, night one was the obvious going to be the better night. And then I think the opposite turned out to be true. Night two ended up being the better night. And I think that for me, it was kind of like the first two matches. I mean, the King of Pro Wrestling, I do not know the point of it. I don't know why it exists. I don't like it. If it wasn't Wrestle Kingdom, I might have skipped it. I regret that I didn't skip it. I hate it. I don't know like what this is supposed to achieve and what Yano owns, whatever. The junior tag title match it was a fine match, but it's nothing that we're going to spend time talking about right afterwards compared to these other things. And honestly, if anything, I would say that my thing is, unfortunately, they're the only champions Suzuki gun. And they kind of killed Maskless Despy. Like, right?
Yeah.
Like, you had this big crowd. And that's, by the way, another match that I would put up there with the best matches since Omega left. I don't think I would put it as high as the other junior matches, I'd say. But yeah, maskless depth. So it just seemed like night 2 just started going the way I expected it to go, where it's just like, yeah, this is just kind of the all-star. Like, let's just get to the main event here, and like, and Evil Sonata's next, and then all of a sudden it's like Cobb and Shingo, and it's like, this will be solid, but I'm kind of thinking it's going to be like a 3-star solid match. It's going to go like 11, 12 minutes, and then just we'll keep going, and Evil Sonata will be brutal, and then I'll finally get the 2 matches I actually want to see. And it just was like right out of the gate, that match just.
See, the one thing I'll say about night 1 versus night 2 is I feel like on a depth level, night 1 was stronger. I loved starting with Hiromu and Phantasmo, which I thought was so much fun. I thought the tag team title match, if you want to talk about another match, it really exceeded my expectations. I thought we talked about it, World Tag League, at great detail. I thought the drizzling shits. I thought they had a spectacular match at Wrestle Kingdom. So good, such energy, the best possible match I could imagine those 2 teams have. And then even Kenta and Kojima, I thought had a pretty solid match.
Yeah, I thought it was solid, but I didn't give a shit. Right? I just don't care about either one of those guys. There was no chance Kenta was ever going to lose. And even though they did the Moxley interview,
which was nice,
but like, I don't give a shit. I really don't. And to me, that was just a fine match. Whereas I liked the way that night 2 was set up, where it's just like, let's get the crap out of the way first, then let's really light it up. That Shingo and Cobb were almost like the real opener. And then you went to Evil and Sonata, and we don't have to talk about that much, but I will say it was the best match I've seen between those 2 guys.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
not a very high bar. But I don't know.
I thought the match was effective. I was like, they did what they were looking to do. They did it. Worked well enough.
And I just, by the way, realized the whole point of the whole Evil thing. Because it didn't, I don't think it really got Evil over. It didn't really get, the titles over for certainly. Didn't get Naito over. Didn't get Sonata over. It got Dick Togo over. Dick Togo, our friend Tom, is rolling around in Dick Togo t-shirts now, and he's super happy.
One of the corniest looking table bumps of the year. New Japan's pretty good about the table bumps not looking super corny. Dick Togo leaping up in the air and driving himself down into the table. Not great. Not great.
Yeah, he hasn't been on TV in a while until the pandemic.
Well, where did you have? I'm curious where you had, because you're a big Hiromu guy. Where you had his match with Eri in terms of his big matches over the last few years. If that was a top 3, top 5.
No. Okay. I would have to. It's not top. I feel very confident with the quick no to top 3. Top 5, I'd have to look it up. I will say, I think the El Phantasmo match night 1, I thought was a little disappointing. I think that it was. I was so jazzed for it, and it was a good match, but I was expecting a great match, and it just didn't. It didn't get there because I think Phantasmo and Hiromu are certainly both capable of that. I think Ishimori got there. They hit that gear. But I feel like I've already seen so much of Hiromu and Ishimori that it just didn't have that drama for me. Again, I never bought for a second that Hiromu wasn't winning. As bad as the Phantasmo night, I actually thought Phantasmo had a better shot because even then they might be able to do something fun and kind of really string out Hiromu winning the title back. But by the time he got to the Ishimori, there was, there's no one at ringside from the Bullet Club. There just felt like there was no shot. Again, it was a great match. It was probably like a 4.5, 4 3/4 type match if I was a snowflake giver. But it just seemed like, again, especially after coming off of the Cobb match earlier, it just didn't seem to, and even the Ospreay Okada match, which again was very dramatic, it just never fully got there. Now, that said, when we talk about who has long-term world title challenger credibility, I think, ironically, Hiromu's right up there, right?
Yeah.
Because this has really shown you, as I've said in the past, I'm really excited. I think that I'm really excited for Sho as the big next challenger. I'm excited with the junior division right now for the first time in a long time in terms of not just the same guys I already like, but it really seems to be developing people for the first time in a long time in a really positive way. And I think Hiromu's outgrown this division. I think he needs to leave in order for this division to really blossom. And I wouldn't be shocked to see him as, even though he's not going to bulk up the way Kenny Omega or Kota Ibushi did. I don't think. I mean, I guess it's possible. I don't think he's going to bulk up to that extent. I just think he's got to. I think next year at Wrestle Kingdom, he's got to be wrestling a heavyweight.
I think there's a little bit more juice of Hiromu in the division, but not a ton. And I think, to your point, no one had been built up well enough where they felt like a real threat to him at a wrestling. I think he and Phantasma will have a better match in the future.
Yes.
Genesis.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and again, also he could do a year like Ospreay's last year in the junior division, right, where we all knew he was leaving. You know, he kind of had already dipped his toe out of leaving. The way that, honestly, even last year, Hiromu never officially left the division, but he had a lot of really big matches against heavyweights, and you know they could keep that going. But I think here's the thing: is I really love that they're celebrating the junior division. They're really celebrating Hiromu. That it really was the equivalent of what like Naito did last year, but for the juniors, and he is certainly the guy that deserves that spotlight and really has brought that prestige to the division. And their goal was really to make him, not to make him a star, he's already a star, but to make him a legend forever. And they achieved that, right? Hiromu, I don't know if New Japan has Hall of Fame. I don't think they do. But Hiromu's a New Japan first ballot Hall of Famer, right? Already.
Well, and I'll also say, speaking of undeniable legends, we first saw the Wrestle Kingdom match. Soon to be undeniable legend, the Great O'Connor. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
It was not. So I'll admit, this was the match, I will say, this was the only match that I kind of backgrounded and was doing other things. But I agree. I think that it was kind of that Hogan monster. It was not as bad as I thought it would be. And Tanahashi's a genius. It wasn't great, but it was serviceable. It didn't belong on Wrestle Kingdom, but if that was the main event of a Tokyo Dome, or not Tokyo Dome, just a normal kind of Road to show, it'd be fine. Yeah.
And again, it may be the start of a path back to Tanahashi. I'm very excited. I want to talk a little bit about some of the directions up top. Obviously, we talked to Bushi and Sonata. That seems like a reasonable first defense for Bushi. I'm very, very excited that it seems like they teased Shingo and Tanahashi to see Shingo's potential as a main eventer.
Yeah.
The potential of the Never belt to be a main event belt for if they're going to continue to have the main two heavyweight titles unified. I'm very interested. Very, very interested. I think that's going to be a really exciting match.
I am very interested in, and I'm also interested, and with who do we think? Because with the tag titles, even, I think one of my takeaways there is obviously Gorillas go over, and my thing there is I actually kind of like that because then let's just go full-throated babyface with the Techers, right? And have them come back, maybe not at a new beginning, but again, it also depends. Obviously, those guys live in America. How long are they in Japan for? We were both a little surprised to see them walk away with the titles just because they don't actually live there. But that's another one I'm really interested for, even though it hasn't been directly teased to us yet.
I a little bit in the end of the new beginning show with Tanahashi, not Tanahashi still. I think that's still that felt like the only match that was obviously in play for those guys.
Yeah, and I also have to say that arguably my single favorite thing that wasn't like directly wrestling was ZSJ going, "It's the fucking Tokyo Dome!" right before that like super powerbomb plex thing was great. And also, by the way, the other thing that could have made that match 5 is Tamaloa wearing the white. I love it. Tama Tonga, you got to wear the white too.
Yeah.
Right. I can't have one of my gorillas in white and the other in his normal gear. They got to get it on together. I love the special Wrestle Kingdom gear or guys that would have like special WrestleMania gear or things like that, but you got to do it as a team.
Darn.
Yeah. So it also does leave us with, I am beginning to think more and more the IC title's never coming back. Which I think really does kind of hurt this mid card, but I like what you're saying where let's make the Never that belt. I'm a little apprehensive just because I love the Never exactly the way it is. That's my belt. That's the Fax belt. Well, that and the Junior belt, of course. But hey, if that's the direction they want to go, and
I also see them once they get the belt off of using the U.S. title a little more prominently. That title's had a weird history, but there's kind of no reason why you couldn't put that on someone who's a rising star.
Or put that on Ibushi too, and then make it the IWGP Triple Crown, just to see what certain people think about that.
I mean, it works for me. Ibushi can have all the belts, and then Kenny can have all the belts, and then they can wrestle each other for. They can. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. In the main event of the Tokyo Dome next year, but they each have single styles. Like Ultimo Dragon walking around with 8 belts on them for a few weeks. What do you say?
I'm in. You know what? They shouldn't even wait. They should actually have Kenny beat Moxley for the U.S. title on Dynamite, right? And then that's why him and Kota need to go against each other for all the titles. He disrespected IWGP like that.
Man, if they could pull that, that would be quite a deal. And I do love that while you look, it's a little bit of fantasy booking. It's not totally out of the question. That's what's so fun about wrestling right now.
Yes, right now it feels less out of the question than it has since AEW started, for sure. And although still very far-fetched.
Oh, yeah.
Very far-fetched.
It's not happening.
It's not for all the titles. Hopefully that match can happen, maybe, but
Sure.
probably not for all the titles.
Oh, I meant like Mox defending U.S. title on Dynamite.
I thought we were going to the extreme.
Unlikely, yeah. but possible. That could be amazing, potentially.
You know what I just hope happens, which I think is much more plausible, is I hope that whenever Mox is able to get to Japan, I hope that they bring him in for 2 or 3 shows, right? Because I really want him to beat Kenta. I just want that this whole briefcase thing that's been so boring, and it's been the worst part of every show that hasn't involved Great O'Khan. And I would just love for it to have all been meaningless, because just Moxley just basically squashes him in 5 minutes, because he should. And then just have him go against somebody else the next night. And just, whatever, lose to it. And I bet that won't happen. I'm sure Tony Khan, by the way, would also prefer if he lost it against somebody that wasn't Kenta, someone further up the card. But I'm sure it won't be that. I'm sure it'll be they'll wrestle. It'll be all Bullet Club bullshit. We know Mox is likely to keep going to Japan. So isn't even going to have a Mox will get his revenge on him next Wrestle Kingdom thing. It just seems like we're setting ourselves up for failure. But I hold out that hope that Mox beats Kenta, even if he ends up then dropping the title to Tanahashi or Suzuki or an Ishii or something. Mox seems like he'd be an Ishii fan, a big Ishii fan.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, their match in the G1 was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I'd love to see him. I bet, because I think he's supposed to work Zack Sabre at some point. I'd be in for that too.
I remember that, yeah.
Zack Sabre's a guy who you could see him taking the belt, casting aspersions on the United States.
Which could again be a babyface move. It's it's a British guy in New Japan. It's the fucking Korakuen Hall. Yeah, I could see that.
No, I think it's going to be an interesting part of the. It's funny because I'm like so excited about the next year, but it also does feel like we're, COVID's on the rise again in Tokyo. They're talking about curfews that might limit the time of these shows. It's concerning. I don't know. We might have some struggles, not quite as bad as New Japan had last year, but might have some struggles this year. So there'll be some challenges, I think, for them. But on the plus side, they were really able to refresh by bringing so many guys in for the last couple months, and get some things back to, I think, a nice position. Because I think they were really, by the time they got to the G1, they had burned out all the guys that were still left in Tokyo during the quarantine.
Yeah. And, it's kind of interesting, and I don't begrudge them for not doing it. This would have been the year to just do a post-Wrestle Kingdom hiatus, right? Where it's just take a month off, a month and a half off, let all the foreigners go back. Let's see what happens. It does seem like it would have been perfect timing. I get why they didn't. Wrestling's a 52, weeks a year show.
A lot of money. They make a lot of their money on the live gate, so even if you can only run for 500 people, if you keep it cheap enough, the shows are profitable.
Yeah.
I think the answer is to do as many shows as possible.
Although again, I'm interested to find out more about that on the business side because they were talking about it on the English language broadcast that this was far and away apparently the most streamed show in New Japan World history. And I can't imagine it's the Western audiences that are really like I can't imagine that the Western audiences are higher than they were for Omega Jericho. So I gotta feel like that's got to be some of the domestic fans getting a little wise to them using that kind of WWE network strategy of just get this biggest show of the year that and I don't know how much that normally would cost on pay-per-view, but get it for $9.99.
Yeah, and look, they've been blessing, and they've really upped the amount of shows you can get on New Japan World over the last year or so. It's going to be a fun time. I mean, if you look at it, in fact, I don't know if you've looked at the upcoming schedule, but
I have not.
There's legit, I don't know, a dozen shows on New Japan World that will be streamable in the last 2.5 weeks of January. We'll have a lot of content, all of which with live English commentary because Kevin Kelly is immense and he's staying in Tokyo until like the end of February or something. So, beautiful man. Thank you, Kevin Kelly. If you ever hear this, thank you. I'm going to go on Twitter now that it's a safe space and tell Kevin Kelly thank you.
Thank you, but I'm also extremely jealous of you, right? That you and we're just home all the time, and he gets to be in Japan, and I get it. There's curfews, but it's fucking Japan. Just the food alone.
Yeah. Kevin Kelly, lucky man.
Do we know when the big new to beginning shows, not the road to shows, the actual shows? Do we know when those cards are expected to come out?
I would expect that's coming down the pike pretty quickly because the first Road to show is next Sunday. So
and I see there's no card for that yet.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting. But that's New Japan for you.
Who knows what's coming down the pike? But excited for it. And then really, because I think you and I coming into these shows were a little bit, not again, concerned is a strong word, but it was like, is this going to be a show that really lives up to the name Wrestle Kingdom?
Right.
And it did. It really felt like Wrestle Kingdom. As we talked about, they let the matches go long. The main events all had all the time they needed, and the crowd was there. It felt great. And so I'm excited for when AEW can get back to this. I'm excited for when even ROH and MLW and the rest can get back to it. I'm excited for when there can be US New Japan shows again. But if I can't have any of that in the near future, it's pretty fucking great to get it.
Yeah, even if this is the mirage in the desert, and this is all we get of this for another 6 or 8 months or more, this was still wonderful and beautiful, and I'm glad that we had it. And I think that this will go down. I think it'll go down as a classic. I don't know if it's the best Wrestle Kingdom ever. My knee jerk is it's not,
No.
And I haven't seen every single one of them. But I mean, let's just look at what I think that most people and myself would give over 4 stars over 2 nights. Right? So you've got Okada Ospreay. I mean, the first Ibushi Naito was probably around there, right? You've got Cobb Shingo, you've got Hiromu Ishimori, and you got White Ibushi. So you're talking an approximately 6-hour show. It's the running time is closer to 8, but there's a lot of intermission. There's a lot of video. There's a lot of stuff. The actual running time was probably closer to about 6 hours to watch just the entrances and the actual matches.
That was good. There was a long video with the first one with the song. I like the tune.
I didn't care for the official song. I will say that I liked how Japanese it was, but it didn't really get me pumped up. But still, nonetheless, so that's what I think it was a 12-match card over both nights, and 5 out of 12 were like 4 stars or better. I mean, this was like night 2. By the way, I would compare night 2 specifically, and it was a little longer, to like one of those great takeover shows from back when like you had literally like 5-match shows and 3 of them were like 4.5 stars or better, and you'd only have 5 matches over 2.5 hours. That's really, I felt night 2 really felt like, if you just ignore the King of Pro Wrestling completely, especially, it just felt like a really good NXT takeover.
Yeah.
And I do mean that in a good way, despite everything else I ever say about WWE.
I will say it was quite a ride. I thank our friend Garrett from the Predetermined podcast for texting me on Sunday night and saying, "Are you going to watch Night One live?" Wasn't sure at the time, but somehow Garrett's to like not that entire show 100% live experience. And thank you. I'm like literally sitting there going like, it's between the Rumble and the start of the main show, which powered me for a while.
Yeah, the Rumble, we didn't talk about it all. The Rumble was...
It was the thing that happened.
And it was a waste of time. Like, you missed nothing. And it is kind of perplexing, and this is the other thing I don't get about King of Pro Wrestling when I say, why did... Like, again, you have, like, Ishii, Goto, Suzuki, these type of guys are in the Rumble. And yet, it was Chase Owens, Fale, Yano, who ends up winning the actual match, and I don't even remember who... Oh, and Bushi. Just seemed like such a random, like, it was almost as though they knew that match on night 2 was going to be so bad that, like, Ishii's like, I'd rather just take the main card off for a year than be in it. Although I do have to mention from the Rambo, though, my boy Hanare had some big eliminations. I do think that it is coming true. I think that we're going to see a somewhat of a push. It might be a lower mid-card push, but we're going to see something of a push for him. And even Doki, he gets knocked out, disqualified from a battle royal. Gotta love it.
That's memorable.
Love that. That's great healing. And he's definitely the heeliest part of the Suzuki Gun faction. And he does come out with the Tekkers, right? I think he was out there with the Tekkers. So again, Doki getting that mainstream push too. So I'd say that's that's in the first couple of minutes of the Rambo. The whole thing is like 40 minutes long or 35 minutes long. Awful.
I'd like to get into the next match, the last guy out, and there were only 3 left. I thought that was funny. But yeah, I hate to see him continue to defend the New Japan Hardcore 24/7 title.
Yeah, and honestly, I would have thought that would have been funnier if we didn't just get a whole stretch of matches in 2020 of Yano winning in ways like that. Like, it's just the joke has run its course. And I like Yano, but I just... Is this just the Yano push? It's just like forever, we're going to do King of Pro Wrestling. It's just always going to be Yano, and he can find comical and sneaky ways to walk away with it. Because I really just don't give a shit. I really aggressively don't give a shit.
Minoru Suzuki is the fucking king. How is he not the... Anyway.
Well, and again, so technically speaking, Chase Owens was on the main card of Wrestle Kingdom. Suzuki wasn't, Goto wasn't, Ishii wasn't. And Doki wasn't. And Sho wasn't. Another guy, but whatever. Anyway, it was a killer show. I think anybody that also saw it is probably has been agreeing with us. It was a killer show. It felt like Wrestle Kingdom. If you, for whatever godly reason, have access to it and haven't seen it, you should see it right away. And if you don't have access, even though the exchange rates are so much that the 999 yen is now slightly over $10 US, it's about $10.08.
Wow.
Like that. The exchange rate has done that, so it is actually more expensive than WWE Network by a couple pennies now, but it is absolutely worth it. And by the way, once you're there, Chris already mentioned, all of these other shows, they're going to have English commentary, and the archive is really, really, really impressive, right? Searching it is tough, but you can message the Curtain Jerks on Facebook. We will send you the links, just if you want some recommendations.
Our good friend said he will be... It's like, hey, how do I find the English commentary matches from 2016? Because we're cool like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can help. We can certainly help with that. All right. Well, That was a great Wrestle Kingdom. It was a Wrestle Kingdom. What can you say? I mean, it's great because it happened and it was real. I am so glad that we got to saw it. I've had a pleasure talking about it with you, Chris.
So yeah, Iris,
I'm Fax.
and we've been the Curtain Jerks.
Adios.